First, I'll start with what weather and climate mean for USAID. So as the U.S. government's international development agency, we work in some of the most vulnerable places in the world. We have programs that cover quite a range of issues, and they're not sort of in equal proportion. By far, the largest area of our work is in health. After that, then, humanitarian assistance. An order of magnitude below those, then, is agriculture, governance, education, and environment. So that's kind of the spread of what we do and then where we do it, largely focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and post-conflict countries. So what does that look like when we're trying to factor in climate change across what we do? I see areas where we don't have connections to weather and climate. A lot of the governance work that we do, if it's judicial reforms or election work or whatever that might be, we leave that out. We have activities that are actually at risk. Those are things like infrastructure projects, anything we do in coastal areas. Those investments actually could be undermined. And the third and most interesting in a way is where we have the potential for synergies, where the objectives of the work we do and climate resilience actually are mutually reinforcing or have the potential to be mutually reinforcing. And the majority of the agriculture work that we do, I believe, falls into that category, the objective of that work being food security. There may be elements of those programs that actually fall into the other two categories, but just in general. So what the challenge is for USAID is screening out that stuff that's not sensitive, reducing the risks where they exist, and taking advantage of those synergies and finding out how we do that with the tools we have, the staff we have, and the partners that we have. So in the context of agriculture, USAID is increasingly factoring weather in as an input to the work that we do. Clearly that's been done since the beginning of agriculture, as a hazard as well, and those infographics told the story perfectly of both of those. But then climate change becomes a dynamic stress because what we understand about weather as an input and weather as a hazard is actually changing. And so that's a whole new competency. It's a whole new challenge for the agency, and I'll come back to the role that information plays because I think that's something to focus on. What those issues mean for aid, a few things to flag just in terms of how the agency is responding. The Global Climate Change Initiative is $350 million a year of dedicated resources toward adaptation and mitigation activities. That's the work that we do to identify objectives and priorities with countries and develop projects that really address those needs. The Climate Change and Development Strategy, which came out in 2012, outlines adaptation and mitigation objectives, but also integration objectives. That's recognizing the rest of our portfolio outside of that smaller piece that's about climate change. And then last week, as Frank mentioned in New York, the White House released the executive order on climate resilient international development. And that really raises the bar for the whole of the US government to systematize, institutionalize, and document how we are actually addressing those three things that I mentioned earlier, screening out what's not sensitive, reducing risk, and taking advantage of synergies. So we will be busy working on that for some time. So back to information, which I think is a key part of the solution here. One example from the work that we do, the SERVIR project, which is a French and Spanish word meaning to serve, is USAID and NASA's flagship collaboration on science and technology. And Frank already mentioned what the objective of that program is, but really USAID works in very data-scarce environments. NASA has this wealth of satellite information, and it's all free and open according to US data policy. USAID is not a science organization, and so through this collaboration, NASA also doesn't have a mandate to help developing countries use its data. It actually can't spend its money overseas. So this partnership is actually incredibly powerful because we can take all of that information and help people take advantage and use it. So building capacity of analysts to work with the data is what we do. Develop tools that actually connect that data to decisions. Agriculture is the perfect example, looking at early information about water availability or soil moisture or crop growth. Improving access to information, which is a complaint we hear time and time again. Data sharing is a problem. People are collecting the same data over and over again. And raising awareness about the value of this information to really create more of a market for it and build demand. So we have 4 regional hubs covering 38 countries currently. We are about to announce the launch of SERVIR in the Mekong region, which will be the newest region to join. And what I want to just end with is some of the innovations that this project has developed to spark all of our creativity a bit further. One of the innovations being new partnerships, being the power of the U.S. government's space agency working with its development agency and what that makes possible. The innovation around collaboration, truly doing things jointly. We have this excellent example in Kenya where a student who was a SERVIR fellow knew that the tea industry in Kenya was suffering a lot due to frost impacts and frost damages, which actually is a very simple solution, using land surface temperatures to map those areas that are likely, according to the weather forecast, likely to be affected by frost. And now the insurance industry is picking that up as an insurable loss, whereas it was not before. So that collaboration with local people and international experts is really powerful as well. And finally, a number of technology breakthroughs, and I'll just identify one. It's very costly to collect data everywhere. And we have now 20 or something NASA satellites, at least, collecting data continuously. The example that I think is the most fascinating is Bangladesh, which has, as everyone knows, a seasonal flooding issue that is probably the worst in the world. And the water coming into Bangladesh comes from India, but India isn't sharing the stream flow data from its territory with Bangladesh downstream. And so the earliest warning that they could produce with very sophisticated models was 3 days. This JASON-2 satellite has a radar altimeter, which means through clouds it can penetrate and get the elevation of water levels within centimeters of accuracy. And so hundreds of miles upstream from Bangladesh, every time the satellite passes over the river, it can collect that river height and drive the model downstream of the likelihood of flooding. And it's actually working. And from a 3-day warning, we now have an 8-day warning. And it's operational in Bangladesh. And it removes that data sharing problem. So we didn't have to go out and measure the river. We used a satellite that was collecting information for all kinds of reasons in a really new way. So I think there's a lot we can do that we haven't even discovered. And communications is really the key. And so what I'll leave you with is the idea of a chain. In that example, you have the origin of that information from the satellite. Its analysis in a certain way so that it can be shared and used and downloaded. Its connection into that tool, into that flood model. That translation into a usable output that someone can understand. The training of someone to use it. The transfer and maintenance of that tool. The communication of that information. And then the measurement of what that value is. And actually to do more of this work, we have to understand that whole chain and be able to communicate what is at once technical and also multidisciplinary effectively. So I hope you have good ideas for how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.